A billionaire's daughter hadn't walked for years, until a poor migrant approached her and said, "Let me try." What if paralysis isn't a sentence, but a refusal to live someone else's life? What if the doctors are wrong, and healing lies not in pills, but in what even the strongest minds are afraid to admit? Sometimes everything changes, not with a shout, but with the soft scrape of a rake in the earth. At 7 a.m., the window in Isabella's bedroom was ajar, as always. Neither the cool morning air nor the gentle rays of the July sun moved her. For 6 years, every morning, every minute, had been exactly the same. An unfamiliar sound, a rhythmic scraping of a rake, broke the monotony. It came from below, from the garden, where a new worker had recently appeared. Isabella didn't pay attention at first, but the next day, and the day after that, she began to catch herself waiting for that sound. She watched him furtively, a middle-aged man with dark skin and a straight posture. He didn't just clear leaves, he touched every plant as if they were his children. When he pruned the roses, he whispered something to them. It wasn't like the usual bustle of workers. It was as if he was talking to them, and they were listening. Isabella once caught herself on a strange thought. She was jealous of those flowers. 6 years ago, on her 18th birthday, her life ended. It happened in a second. An awkward movement, a fright, and the horse, a magnificent black-maned stallion, reared up. Falling from it, she felt something inside her snap. L1, L2, L3. Those 3 vertebrae became numbers in her sentence. Complete paralysis below the waist. The Richardson mansion was fully equipped. Elevators, automatic doors, special baths. The villa had turned into a gilded cage. The most expensive doctors in the world came, looked, clicked their tongues, recommended the latest methods. Nothing changed. Sometimes she felt she had died, but no one had simply told her. When the new gardener appeared, no one introduced him. Isabella learned from a maid that his name was Matteo. Bolivian, quiet, doesn't drink, doesn't argue, works non-stop. No one knew more about him. But there was something elusive about him, something that made you look. He moved as if he heard not only sounds, but also things that weren't there. His gaze. There was something in it that made Isabella unable to look away. That night she barely slept. The sound echoed in her head, the scrape of the rake, like a pulse of life. On the 4th morning, she called him under the pretext of discussing the roses. He entered the hall hesitantly, stepping uncertainly on the snow-white marble. He didn't know where to look. At the luxurious columns, the paintings, or the woman in the wheelchair. "Senorita Richardson, you wanted to talk about the roses." His voice was not loud, but firm. "The garden is very beautiful," she paused. "But you work as if you're not a gardener. Who are you, Matteo?" He lowered his gaze slightly and suddenly said, "I used to treat people, but now only plants." It was said not with sadness, but as a fact. Isabella inhaled slowly. Why only plants? He smiled slightly with the corners of his lips, silently, but after a pause added, "Because plants don't complain and aren't afraid of what they feel." The phrase hung in the air. Isabella didn't know how to respond. 2 days later, she called him again. "Have you had patience with injuries like mine?" she asked when he brought freshly cut lavender. He nodded, "Yes, and not only like that. Some had wounds you can't see on scans." She looked at him for a long time. "Do you believe I can walk again?" He looked her straight in the eye. "Perhaps, but it's not only the body that needs healing." She sat in silence, her hands trembling slightly. I want to try. It will be unofficial. Not all methods are recognized, and you might be afraid. I've been afraid for 6 years. It can't get worse, she said quietly. Matteo didn't answer, just inclined his head slightly, like a person acknowledging another's courage. So began what no one in that house was to know. A secret between a woman bound to a wheelchair and a man who had been carried far from medicine into the gardens. It was at that moment, when she said, "I want to," that the world shifted slightly. As if somewhere below, among the roses, a branch sighed in the wind. Finally, some wounds aren't visible on the body, but they bleed longer. The second session was early in the morning, while the whole house was still asleep. The servants started their shift only at 9 o'clock, and Isabella's father had flown to Houston the day before. They agreed to meet in the family spa complex, located in the east wing of the villa, rarely used since her accident. When she wheeled in, Matteo was already waiting. He had brought a small wooden box wrapped in cloth that smelled of something spicy and sweet, a mixture of dried herbs and oils. "This is not treatment in the usual sense," he warned. "I am not a doctor in a white coat, and we only do this if you truly want it." "I already said I want to." Isabella looked him straight in the eyes. "Or should I say it again?" He nodded, not as a doctor, but as a man who heard not just words, but intention. At first it was all strange, silly, almost absurd. But after half an hour, she felt something else. A lightness in her shoulders, warmth in her lower back. He touched her back, very softly, just with his fingertips, and her body, which had long forgotten touch, shuddered. "When was the last time you felt that something truly belonged to you?" he suddenly asked. She didn't understand the question at first. "Probably when I was on the horse, before the fall. Just me, the wind, and midnight. I was free, alive." He nodded, continuing to work her muscles, not just with his hands, but with his whole body, as if listening to her back. "Then we will try to return, not just movement. We will return the feeling of freedom." On the third session, he brought music. Not the familiar classical music that played in the hall in the evenings, but something completely different. The sounds of a flute, a rainstick, distant rhythms, like from the mountains, Bolivian melodies, as Isabella later learned. He used a strange powder and herbs, rubbing them into the skin over her spine. He spoke in a language she didn't understand. His voice, low and calm, filled the space, and then a tingling, first light, like a foot falling asleep, then sharp, like from a needle. She gasped, "What is that?" He leaned closer. "That's good, you're back. These are your nerves. They are waking up." She didn't believe herself, but she couldn't ignore what she felt. He didn't touch her below the waist, but she felt movement. "This is impossible," she whispered. Matteo smirked. "Everything you're used to calling impossible is what you fear the most." After the session, he sat nearby. She looked at the ceiling. He looked at her. "Why did you leave medicine?" she asked. He was silent for a long time, then said, "Because a patient died, and I couldn't prove I did everything I could. I treated him, not by the protocol. I used my grandmother's knowledge. They revoked my license, accused me of fraud." "And you?" she asked, frozen. "I still don't know if I could have saved him, but I know one thing. Since then, I only treat those who are ready to hear themselves, not just doctors." He stood up, gathered his things, and before leaving, said, "Tomorrow, same time, if you decide to continue." That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. Phrases, touches, the sound of the flute swirled in her head, and that feeling, as if her body was truly alive, as if she was in it again. And suddenly, not a flash, but a room from childhood. Parents shouting, her voice weak, drowning in their anger. The horse a gift from her father after a string of his affairs. Her mother crying in the hallway, and Isabella staying silent, always silent, even when she wanted to scream. Tears streamed down her temples. Matteo didn't ask what she remembered. He just placed a hand on her shoulder, and she suddenly whispered, I didn't want to ride that day, but my father insisted. He said I had to be brave, a Richardson. I didn't want to be a part of it all anymore. I got into the saddle like it was a trap. He didn't answer, just pressed a point between her shoulder blades a little harder. In the next session, she felt heat in her feet for the first time. She said it out loud like a confession. My legs, they're burning. That's blood, energy, memory, said Matteo. You are truly returning. She laughed and cried at the same time. He gave her a herbal decoction, bitter, viscous, burning her tongue. She drank every drop and suddenly felt such lightness in her body that she was frightened, as if it could move, as if nothing was holding it back anymore. Are you afraid to walk again? Matteo said, not looking at her. She shuddered. Why do you say that? Because sometimes an injury is a shelter. In the wheelchair, you are protected. No one demands, no one shouts, no one forces you to be the heiress. That evening, she opened an old notebook. It lay in a drawer of personal items, covered in dust. There were sketches, thoughts, dreams, her dreams, before the fall. There wasn't a single word about the family business or the corporation, only about art, botany, scents, living in the forest. That was the real her. Isabella closed the notebook, and for the first time in a long time felt anger not at her father, not at the injury, but at herself for years of silence. You don't want to be Isabella Richardson, Matteo said one day. You want to just be Isabella. She nodded, slowly, with fear, but she nodded. Then you will have to lose everything you were given to become who you want to be. I've already lost a lot, she replied, but now at least I know why. On the 6th session, the impossible happened. Matteo ran his hands along her knees, and she suddenly felt movement, real, clear. Her knees jerked, as if from an impulse, not imagination, not wishful thinking, a real muscle contraction. He froze. Do you see that? She whispered. Yes, and not just me. He raised his eyes to her. His gaze was different. There was no surprise, no pride, only deep understanding and a kind of cautious pain, as if he knew the path was only beginning and would be harder than before. That evening, she wrote a letter to her father, without reproaches, without requests, just one paragraph. If you truly want me to be strong, let me walk the path I choose for myself, not the one you built for me. She didn't send it, but it was written, meaning she had told him the truth for the first time. Sometimes, to stand on your own feet, you first have to fall in the eyes of others. He entered without knocking. Isabella was sitting in a chair by the window. A fresh decoction was still steaming on a tray. After the session with Matteo, she felt a slight tingling in her calves, and for the first time in years, she didn't want to hide from the sun. But when the door swung open and her father stormed in, tall, powerful, still an energetic man with a gaze like a knife blade, the air thickened. Who is this man? Her father's voice was quiet, but it held a threat. What man? Don't play ignorant. The Bolivian, the gardener. Or do you think no one sees him leaving the spa every morning? You think the servants are silent. His name is Matteo, she said calmly. And yes, we meet in the mornings, and not for the roses. Richard Richardson came closer. His steps echoed on the marble. You let this imposter touch you, touch your body after everything the best doctors in the world have done for you. Yes, she answered firmly, because all they did was nothing. For 6 years I sat in this chair. Now I can feel my legs. Her father froze. What? I can feel my legs. The calf muscles are responding. I feel touch tingling. Matteo documented it. Without expensive machines, without a team of assistants. Richard took a step back. It's suggestion. You want to believe, and he's taking advantage. A charlatan. He doesn't even have a license. I had him checked. In Bolivia, he was suspended for using folk methods. He's dangerous. Isabella looked at her father as if for the first time. His fear was almost tangible, but not for her, for control, for the image crumbling before his eyes. Dangerous. He's the first one to give me in 6 years what you couldn't hope. You're naive, her father exploded. He's playing on your pain. Tomorrow you'll be back in that chair, only with a broken spirit. Better a broken spirit than a dead heart. The phrase hung in the air like a blow to glass. Her father slowly exhaled. Fine, if you're so sure, prove it. In 7 days, you'll have an examination with Dr. Valdez, an independent specialist, a neurophysiologist. I trust him. If you show him real improvement, I won't interfere. But if not, the sessions stop, and you fire this man for good. That evening, Isabella told Matteo. He listened silently, not surprised, just nodded. 7 days, he said. It's not much, but it's enough, if you're ready. I'm ready, but I'm scared. That's good. Fear is a sign you're moving beyond your old self. If I don't get up, ... She didn't finish. You will get up. The question isn't, can you? The question is, will you allow yourself to? With each day, they worked more. He began working not only with her body, but with her voice, making her say what she had hidden for years. Anger at her mother, who had withdrawn into herself. Fear of her father's business. The feeling that she was just a name on a corporate cover. The pain of never having chosen her own life. You held everything down, Matteo said, and the body obeyed. It became immobile, like your will. Now you are taking it back. On the 7th day, she couldn't sleep. Her body was tense, as if before a jump. She looked at her legs under the blanket and whispered into the darkness, "Please, don't fail me." Matteo came in before dawn. "Today we won't do anything new," he said. "It's all already done. Now you go to the doctor, not to prove that you can, but to show who you are." Dr. Valdez's office was cool and sterile. He was an older, reserved man with the face of someone who had been lied to often. He attached sensors to her legs, checked her sensitivity, noted the slight responses. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Now," he said, "try to tense your thigh. If it works, we'll see it." Matteo stood to the side. He didn't interfere, just watched. Isabella closed her eyes, breathed in, breathed out, and at some moment, a barely noticeable movement, but the sensors flared up. A muscle responded. "Again," said Valdez, his expression now different. She concentrated again. Her toes twitched. Again, the sensors registered a contraction. Then, unexpectedly, but clearly, her knee moved upward for a second. 1 second. One impulse. After 6 years of silence.
A silence hung in the office. Valdez slowly took off his glasses. "It's not possible, but it's there." Matteo came over and stood next to her. I did that," she whispered, disbelieving. "No," he said. "You simply stopped forbidding yourself to live." Her father read the report in silence. His face didn't change. Only at the end did he say, "I don't understand how, but it's a fact." "All right." He stays. And he left. When the door closed behind him, Isabella broke down crying. Not from pain, not from fatigue, but because for the first time in 6 years, she had won. And now it was only beginning. Sometimes, to save others, you must first save yourself. At least once. Completely. 6 months later, she opened the door herself, slowly, but without help. Her left hand held a cane. Her right confidently pressed the panel. The transparent entrance door to the Center for Integrative Medicine opened. Behind it was a white space with live plants, soft light, and the smell of eucalyptus. The center bore her name, not as an act of vanity, but as a reminder. She had been through hell and returned. After the meeting with Dr. Valdez, everything happened quickly. The media learned of the impossible recovery. Journalists surrounded the villa. Isabella refused interviews. She knew a story without substance was just a sensation, and she wanted something else. First, silence. Then, a plan. She gathered the board of directors of the family corporation. Some of them knew her only from graduation photos. When she spoke, her voice trembled, but every word hit its mark. I am the majority shareholder. My vote is decisive. We are opening a center. It will work at the intersection of science and tradition. Sessions supported by medical equipment. Methods that don't reject the body but respect the spirit. I know it works. I stood up. And it's not a miracle. It's a chance. The hall fell silent, then erupted in arguments. One senior board member declared it a blow to their reputation. Another said it wasn't business but charity. A third called Mateo a problem with a South American accent. Then she said, I will create profit where you see risk. People who have given up in hospitals will come to us. Not for a miracle, but for a second chance. The center opened in early spring. The press expected a glamorous show, but instead found a small hall, patients with various diagnoses, and Isabella standing at a microphone. No podium, no stage. I don't promise that each of you will walk, she said, but I promise you will be heard. Not just scanned, not just measured, but heard. The applause was not loud, but it was sincere. Mateo didn't want to become director of therapy. He refused 3 times. But Isabella insisted. You don't just heal. You remind a person they are alive. Now he had an office. Not white, not sterile. On the wall were photographs of the Bolivian mountains and a portrait of his grandmother. In the corner, baskets of herbs, a cabinet of oils, and the kind of silence needed for real work. Some doctors looked at him with irony. Until the first session when a patient with chronic back pain slept without pills for the first time in 10 years. Until a woman with post-traumatic stress disorder began to breathe without panic. Until a boy diagnosed with unexplained loss of sensitivity was able to move a finger. And gradually, on the level of micro-movements, the center, and the bodies within it, something began to happen that couldn't be explained by medical terms alone. Isabella's father didn't visit the center at first. He stayed in the shadows. But one evening she saw him in the hall. He stood by the window, watching an elderly patient in a wheelchair talking with Mateo. I wanted to say, he began, not turning around, that you did something I didn't expect. You never asked what I wanted, she replied calmly. He turned. Now I am ready to ask. And to listen. Isabella didn't say anything, just hugged him. For the first time not as a daughter, but as a person who was no longer afraid to be herself. 6 months later, some of her braces were removed. She no longer needed the chair. The cane remained. A symbol, a reminder, and a choice. Not as weakness, but as testimony to the journey. The center became known. Stories ran on television. Letters arrived. People came from other states. Some secretly, afraid of ridicule. Some believed, some hoped. And to all of them, she said one thing. Don't be afraid of the impossible. Be afraid of staying where you've long outgrown. One day she went out into the garden again, to the spot where she had first seen Mateo. The grass was different, but the same roses grew. She approached them, touched a petal, and said, Thank you for making me look down then, and not at the wall. Footsteps sounded behind her. Mateo, flowers don't like to be thanked. They just do what they know how to do. And you? She asked. He smiled. I'm just a gardener. She looked at him, then at the sky. And I'm just a woman who walks again. And not only with her legs, but on her own path.